all the crop analysis, and we are going to start it out with looking at the global green lentil outlook. And you know, the International Year of Pulses has fostered a huge wave of more information and interest and a big media buzz about what terrific crops these are. And in fact, it has been so impressive that it's reached into other areas of the economy. In fact, here this week in the airport of Atlanta, they had a confiscation of red beans, and the Customs Department found red beans, and they found cocaine inside the red beans in honor of the International Year of Pulses. And so when they asked the person who owned these red beans, they said, well, we were going to use lentils, but they were too expensive. There was too big a margin on the lentils. I thought you buyers would appreciate that, right? So I want to, first of all, I want to thank our session sponsor this morning. Java Halal and Sons is the session sponsor of this event. And again, I want to thank our session sponsors, because without our sponsors, these sessions would not be possible. We really appreciate your support. I'd like to introduce our panel for the Global Green Lentil Outlook. So I'd like Pedro Alvarez and Harsha Rai, Nico Giorglu, Athik Ansari to come to the stage. And I'd like to introduce our presenter, or our moderator for this panel, Gerald Donkersgood from Ilta Grain. And Gerald and I were talking yesterday, and Gerald has been in this business for 30 years now, and trading lentils, he tells me, since 1984. So again, let's welcome the Global Green Lentil panel to the podium, and your moderator, Gerald Donkersgood.
I'll get my cast to come on up and give me some moral support up here. I'll make a formal introduction with some details of these people after I make a few comments here this morning. Anyways, welcome to Turkey. It's great to be back, the ancestral home of lentils. When you ask a veteran to talk, you have to listen to a story from the past. That's kind of just the way it goes. And so we'll just tell a quick story of my first visit to Turkey back in 1986. In 86, we had just started growing lentils in Canada in a big way. Production was expanding, acreage was increasing. But we were still a small player in the world. We were competing with Turkey. Turkey was the historical producer, marketer, price setter of green lentils. So in Canada, we didn't really know what was happening in Turkey. 86 was before digital, but after the invention of the wheel. It seemed like a long, long time ago. And so we had to figure out a way to understand what was going on in Turkey. And so let me get my clicker going here and see if we can. So this is what happened in 1986. And we were, as I said, a smaller producer, just getting going, figuring out how to grow this crop with the new varieties that we had introduced. Research was starting to happen. But again, knowing what was happening in Turkey was critical. So in 86, I came across to Turkey, made some arrangements with the Canadian consulate or embassy, got a driver and an interpreter, and off we went through central Anatolia. And that was my first experience with Turkish hospitality, Turkish shish kebabs on the roadside. We stopped in towns like Çorum and Sivas and Konya, Kayseri, and we had a marvelous time going through the lentil fields trying to figure out what was happening with the lentil crop that year. Came back from my tour and banged all the information into the hotel telex machine so the people back home would know what was going on. One quick story, on that tour, came over a hillside, and it was a pretty hot day in July. And so there was a wagon on the side of the road, and it was so hot that a father and his son were under the wagon in the shade, just taking some respite from the heat. But it wasn't so hot that their wives, their sisters, their daughters were out in the field pulling the crop up by hand. So that was quite a searing memory for me. Now we come back 30 years later, and I'm happy to say that the women are still involved in the lentil industry, in the pulse industry. I see lots of young Turkish women involved in management and trading, so I think there's a marvelous progress that we've made here in Turkey with the young women joining us in the pulse business. The first word I learned was mercimek. That was back in '86, still a traditional food now, served in fine lounges all over the world, or at least in Istanbul. And I think now they're actually eating Canadian lentils in that lounge, I think. So we'll jump ahead to 2015, just this past year. Things have changed in Turkey. Last year produced maybe 20,000 tons. '86, it was more like 150,000 tons, and a much bigger crop the following year because of the support by the Turkish government. Canada last year produced about 600,000 tons. The U.S., I'm thinking about 175, 180. The good news here is we're in a growth industry, and production has expanded in the last 30 years. We're able to market all of this crop. It's becoming increasingly important in many, many non-traditional markets as well as growing traditional markets. So we're all part of a growth industry, and that's why the room was full here this morning. Where are we at today? Well, we're pretty well sold out. The lentil stocks are exhausted in Canada. I'm talking about green lentils, of course. Farm bins are empty. Warehouses, pipelines are empty. We have cleaned out the crop, and I would suggest we didn't grow enough green lentils last year. We have high prices, as you know, and high prices ration demand, and it's done a great job because the stocks are empty. So the tap has been adjusted quite finely, and we're sold out. So we are 100% dependent on this crop. There's no buffer stocks from last year, and so here we are at the mercy of the next 12 to 14 weeks of growing weather in North America. Current conditions in Canada are pretty good. We've probably got about 80 to 90% of the crop in the ground. We're off to a nice start. Some areas were quite dry coming into the spring. We had a warmer, drier winter than usual, but we had good rains May 10th. 25, 50 millimeters of rain, caught a lot of the drier areas. So the moisture maps are much, much happier in Canada than they were when we started the spring. Just a few quick maps here. You can see where some of the problem areas might have been. These are moisture maps for different information. This one is... Well, you can see the colors, and I'm going to just talk a moment for the colors. In the red, in Alberta, and the west is the drier areas. If you go up a little bit north, that's where Fort McMurray is. You've all seen the video from Fort McMurray. Quite dry. If you go down the map, look at the bottom, you see a little yellow and bronze. That's where we've had some better rainfall in the last 6 weeks. That's where the majority of the better quality, good producers of green lentils are located. Their moisture has improved considerably, so that area is off to a nice start. You can see here the blue as well, more or less a reflection of the same thing. The moisture profile has improved considerably in the last 2 weeks. Again, looking at a different set of metrics here, but you can see the color coding, and that's an indication of how good the moisture conditions are at the moment. But we'd like to talk about the weather. So we're just finishing El Nino, and this is a picture from Fort McMurray. That's a reflection of the warm, dry winter we had. Now, El Nino in Western Canada can cause a warmer and drier winter, which is what we experienced this past year. We're transitioning now to La Nina, and in Western Canada, typically, that means we move from a warmer, drier pattern to a warmish, wetter pattern, as I understand it, talking to the meteorologists. And so we have to be a little cognizant of when that transition is going to occur. And my niggling little fear, one thing that keeps me a little bit awake at night, is just how we're going to finish off the rest of this growing season. My gut tells me that we're going to have maybe a bit of a wetter summer, which should be good for yield, but that also encourages disease problems. We don't need nuisance rains at harvest time. So we have to be a little bit in tune with how this transition is occurring in Western Canada, because that will impact yield, of course, but also eventually the quality of this crop that's coming up in a few weeks. A little aside, I think global warming is for real. Whether El Nino, La Nina, I think we had those before global warming, but I saw a little slide a while back that showed the end game for global warming when there's only one tree left, and this is the world that we'll see. Anyway, so I don't think we'll get there anytime soon, but moving on. The numbers, I'm not sure you can read them at the back. These are just the S&Ds from Brian Clancy at STAT. He's graciously allowed me to use some of this information, and the numbers speak for themselves. And everybody sees these numbers. There's nothing new here. You all have access to this. We all know that acreage in Canada has increased for lentils, more so for red than for green. The one interesting number I see here, if you look at the second row on the average yields, and he's got penciled in here 1,387 pounds average yield. I wonder about that number for this coming year, and the reason I do is because we had a massive perfect crop in 2013, outside the box in terms of yield. And so when we do average yields, we go back averaging the last 5 years. And I'm going to say that that year was an outlier. And I don't think we should be using that as part of an average yield equation going forward. So if you take that out, all of a sudden you drop out 50,000 tons of stocks. And so then all of a sudden you've got a carryout stock this year of only 38,000 tons. If you buy into the acreage, if you buy into the average yield, and again, we're going to be tight. And I know all of us talk a lot about how big the acres are in Canada. We've pushed through 5 million acres of lentils. The green lentil expansion isn't that significant. We ran out of lentils this past year, and we're going to be tight again this year. There's tremendous opening demand for new crop. I've joked with a few buyers that I've sold the first shipment 42 times already out of our plant. There's just that much demand piling up for recharge. So we'll see how that pencils out. The medium lentils in Canada, almost an afterthought, a rounding error, not really significant production. We'll drift these medium caliber lentils into various markets, blended out with Laird's. They'll find a home somewhere, so they're going to go. The small caliber lentils, we'll see an increase in acreage there. We're already seeing significant deep demand from many markets that want that first shipment after harvest. So we're gonna be coming out of the gate pretty hard, pretty aggressive with sales, shipments. The demand is there. It's significant, and where the pipeline is going to be recharged fast. So then that question becomes, how fast will the grower sell it? Now, inventories of grain in Canada are pretty low, the lowest they've been in 3 years. We're sold out of yellow peas, we're sold out of green lentils, we're well sold on canola, wheat, barley, traditional crops that we grow in Canada. Point being, farmers have lots of storage. They're disciplined marketers. We'll see what they do with the lentil crop as it comes off the harvest. And I've noted over the years that if we have a difficult harvest, it's more difficult getting the grain off the farm. So we'll see how the rest of the growing season goes. The U.S. doesn't break out the numbers by variety, so this is a cumulative number here from all production of red, pardina, and green lentils. But my American friends tell me about 75% of this production is green lentil. So a healthy increase in lentils, but again, the carryout stocks are going to be smaller than they were 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. So good demand. Their harvest will come off a little quicker than ours. Again, I wonder about the average yields. They too had a good crop in 2013. Their acreage expansion in Montana, North Dakota, probably more virgin growers, first-time growers. It's not an easy crop to grow. You need a little bit of experience. So I'm, at this point, suggesting maybe we won't have the average yields. that are reflected here, and that will shrink the crop a little bit from these numbers. I talked about the inventories being very low in Canada for grains, about the lots of on-farm storage. We've got some marketing challenges, low oil price that affects Algeria, for example, a major market of ours. US dollars are scarce, payments are slow, controlled by the government. That makes the trade a little reluctant to get too deep into Algeria. And poor Venezuela, 3 years ago they imported 45,000 tons of lentils, last year not 1 kilo. I'm not sure what they're eating, but things are pretty tough down there. Sanctions lifted in Iran, so we'll talk maybe with Atik in a moment what that means, a growing, burgeoning market for green lentils. The elephant in the room is the Indian government. Hear from the government, here to help. Not so sure. The antics of the last few months have really upset the traditional commercial trade and the buyers in India. India's become a significant buyer of North American lentils, 200 to 250,000 tons a year. That certainly wasn't the case in '86. The tour market is very strong, a couple of poor monsoons. Next harvest isn't until December, January. Tour values today are around $1,400. So a lentil substitute at something less than that probably still works. So despite the government challenges and intervention in India, I see continued good demand for green lentils moving into India. So the key points this morning, most of the increase in lentil planting in Canada is in the red, not the greens. Our green lentil production is going to be lower than 2012, 2013. Our pipeline stocks are empty. We need to recharge. We've got significant deep demand for early shipments. We have to watch India. That's an evolving situation. We need to restore some confidence to the importers in India. The global economy and the oil prices. Current conditions in Canada are Goldilocks. Everything is perfect, but I always say when things are so good that they can't get better, they can only get worse. So I guess that's a little bit of the negative outlook I have sometimes. But we've seen in the past years the conditions become too hot, too cold, too dark. There's many things that happen to that crop along the way. So we're about 14 weeks away, and we'll watch the weather carefully. Bottom line, I think green lentil stocks are going to improve this year, but I don't think they're going to be burdensome, and I think the farmers will be disciplined sellers, and these values that we have currently won't erode too much from where we're at currently. Anyways, there's the green lentil presentation from my side of the desk, and now we'll introduce some of the panel, and we can have a few questions and talk about a few things. So the gentleman closest to me is Nico. I've worked with him for many, many years, part of a well-established brokerage firm in Athens with his brother. They manage or handle a lot of different food items coming into Greece and do a good job of representing our interests in the Greek market. Harsha comes from Indore, India. Her father is well known and well respected, and every time I talk to Harsha about things, often she mentions her father as her mentor, a great influence in her life, and obviously he's done a good job because she's a sharp lady and she knows her business. She's got good contacts around the world and very informed about the situation in India. Atik I've known for a while. He's newlywed. That's why he's smiling this morning, and works with a family firm in Dubai, and they do a good job representing and defending exporters to Dubai and working in the local market in Dubai. And Pedro at the end from Spain, fourth generation. So his family's been involved for the business a long, long time. Importers, packagers, distributors in Spain, and a major pulse player in Spain. So I'll ask a couple of questions, and then we'll move on to opening up to the floor. Spiro, what's happening in Greece in terms of consumption? A wealthy economy? Do we have a microphone? I'm not sure if we have any microphones. I guess where I'm going with that question is, how are the consumption patterns changing? Fast food. What's happening with the economy in Greece? It's a reflection of, let's say, wealthy economies around the world.
So I have to tell you that Greece is a country of 11 million people, and its annual consumption of green lentils is about 14,000 tons. This is steady for at least the last 3 years or more. Half of this consumption is coming from the local crops, which are in small villages and in small areas, as Greece has no big plains. And the rest is imported. About 80 to 90% is coming from Canada, and the rest from the USA. From Canada, again, 80 to 85% is small lentils, Estons, and the rest is large. From the USA is some Richleys and even less US regular lentils. Price quality-wise, Greece is a very sensitive market, and we always buy grade 1. We cannot afford grade 2 or extra 3 or 3. And again, the price was, let's say, it was not a price-sensitive market so far, but the last year and the year before was exceptional, as the lentil prices went very high. For 2016, we are very light bought so far, and we are hoping that Canada will have a good crop, which has been already almost planted, and that after India is satisfied with their purchases, there will be some left for us at competitive prices. And we are looking forward to see what is going to happen.
Thanks, Nico. Harsha, maybe in 2 minutes you could describe what's happening with the political situation in India. Is that possible? What is happening in India, and what's the end game going to be?
Right now in India, we see a lot of government intervention because of the prices moving higher almost every day. We don't see a lot of stocks left for many commodities. We don't see lentils left over, we don't see chickpeas, we don't have pigeon peas. But government has no option but to put some kind of stock limits, or they're coming up with rates and every possible measure that they can take for prices to stop moving higher. But if we talk about green lentils particularly, I think the stocks of green lentils in India is really tight. We have been getting 2.5 lakh ton every year, like from last 2-3 years. But this year it is only 1.5 lakh ton that we have received from the growing areas, growing countries. So we do have a very tight situation for green lentils. And particularly government action on green lentils, I don't see that, because it is just a substitute for pigeon peas, which mainly goes into the tender and south part of the India. But yes, government is trying hard so that the pigeon peas prices don't move higher. But I see our crop coming in November, December. Before that, we don't have big stocks of pigeon peas, or we don't have big buffer for that matter, any kind of lentils. So it is all dependent on monsoon for the next year. I wonder what government is going to do with the monsoon.
Something beyond their control. Thanks, Harsha. So Atik, what's happening in Dubai? What's the mood with the lifting of the sanctions? How is the environment? Dubai has exploded in terms of being a major hub for pulses in recent years. What's happening in Dubai?
Yeah. First of all, good morning, everybody. It's very good to see so many people in the room. With the speakers committee, we were thinking of how to get so many people in, so I think we've done something right. I have a tendency to speak fast. If I do, please raise your hand so I can repeat. Okay, as far as Iran is concerned, the sanctions in Iran have hit them pretty hard. 2 years ago, Iran's a big buyer of green lentils from Canada, and we used to buy from Turkey, but now mainly from Canada. When the sanctions hit them, we looked at some official statistics of imports. The first year, the consumption was down to like 40 to 50,000 tons, mainly because they couldn't pay for the lentils. They wanted them, but they couldn't pay for them. But last year, surprisingly, Iran imported. Why I keep mentioning Iran? Because Dubai is a big re-export destination, so most of the stuff that comes to Dubai ends up in Iran, especially the green lentils. Last year they imported approximately 110,000 tons. That's official. Unofficially, people say that it could be up to 150,000 tons. So I think they're very resilient people. They found a way of paying for them somehow, to get the lentils in. Now with the sanctions being lifted, last month the EU allowed euro payments against oil for Iran. So this is going to be a big change in the demographic of the people buying green lentils. So I think where you had a few people who could afford to get green lentils through the door or could pay for them through China or Turkey or India, now you'll see many more players in the market. But as far as demand is concerned, I think they found alternate ways of getting in. For example, a lot of green lentils entered through Turkey last year. They had also some coming from the Black Sea, from Kazakhstan, from Russia, approximately 20 to 30,000 tons. Dubai imported 60,000 tons last year from Canada. I think these numbers will more or less remain the same. But an interesting thing to note is that with prices going high, as they have been over the last year, a lot of people, especially on the Turkish side, the Turkish-speaking population in Iran, are switching to red lentils. So we've been seeing some good imports of red splits into Iran. So I think this is kind of diversifying the consumption patterns. A lot of them are switching from greens to reds. But going forward, I think Dubai is going to maintain its destination as a hub because of its port facilities and storage and excellent finance. So it'll be interesting to know what's happening over the next year.
Thanks, Atiq. And Pedro, what's happening in Spain? You got a Castellana crop coming up. Personally, I've kind of lost touch with the Spanish market in recent years, so I'd be curious to know what's happening in Spain in terms of green lentils.
Well, Spain is a very mature market. Figures are like an average. We import about 60,000 tons of lentils. Half of them used to be Pardina lentils. As you know, we were the producers of Pardinas. Now we are buying in the US, but we also have a small crop. An average of 20,000 hectares are planted every year. But the problem we have is that yields are very variable from years. As we depend a lot of weather, we can get yields of 600 kilos per hectare or double. So we cannot really take into account our crop, so we are dependent on lentils. And the two main countries we get the lentils from are Canada and the US.
Thanks, Pedro. You made a comment there about being dry or dry land conditions. I was in India for 2 weeks in February with a convention in Jaipur, and it struck me how much news there was in the paper about water shortages. And I think that's tying with the global warming, with what's happening through the Med, sometimes with drier conditions. And I always say that we're not exporting lentils or pulses, we're exporting value-added water, because we're moving these pulses into markets, into countries that don't have the water resources to produce the crops that we can grow in North America. So that's the business we're in. It's value-added water. Any questions from the floor? We'll open it up, and we've got some time here, so we'd like to have a bit of a discussion going on green lentils. We can't have answered all the questions in half an hour. I'm sure there's something that somebody would like to ask about or start a discussion. Yes. Good morning, Andrew.
Morning, Gerald. Andrew Jacobs from AGT Portman. Iran, having now re-entered the global market, are they going to be able to buy directly from Canada rather than rely on Dubai or other entrepôts?
I guess I'll take that, or do you want to try that, Atiq? Go ahead. There are some challenges. You know, the first one is to find carriers that will go to Iran, and we don't have a surplus of carriers that want to carry cargo to Iran. There are some logistical challenges. I don't think Iran yet, even though the sanctions are lifted, have been accepted into the SWIFT payment system, so there's some challenges there. The Iranian authorities want documents consularized, and we haven't had an Iranian embassy in North America for many, many years. There is no formal plant health agreement between the two countries. Our CFI, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, people, I think, are trying to initiate some contacts with their Iranian counterparts to get a protocol in place. Hasn't happened yet, so I'm sure we can get a FIDO, but they're kind of in the dark as to what the Iranian authorities need. So there's a lot of work to be done. The headline is the sanctions are lifted. There are still some obstacles and frustrations to actually concluding commercial business. It'll come, I think, Andrew, but I don't know how fast all of those loose ends will get tied up.
Can I add something?
And Atik?
Yeah, and also, if you look at the coastal line of Iran, it's a very big coastal line. So normally the biggest port they have is Bandar Abbas, but Dubai, because of its location, its strategic location, is able to service all the smaller ports in the area. Like you have Bandar Khomeini, Bandar Linge, all these small ports which have different populations they service. So I think Dubai going forward is going to be a major destination. But you're right. I mean, you'll find many more Iranian buyers. I mean, for example, I'm sure every Iranian has some Canadian relatives, so you'll have a lot of calls coming in asking for offers for green lentils. But I think I more or less concur with what he's saying.
Is that okay, Andrew? You good? Okay. Next question. Yes, sir. Sudhakar. Oh, is that where the microphone's going?
Good morning. What about the price differential between the red lentils and the green lentils? Is it following a pattern or is it going completely in different directions? And the second question, green lentils, why does it have to be so green? Once you cook, it turns into a brownish. But there's some about green.
I think you'll have to ask the housewife that question, or the one that buys the lentils in the package on the color. And on the price relationship between the reds and the greens, separate markets, I suppose. Green lentils, from an agronomic point of view, it's more difficult to get the grade. The red lentils sell as a 2 or better. On the Lairds, there's a premium for the top quality. Not easy to get. Some years we don't get enough. So it's lower yielding. They move somewhat in tandem because of psychologically it makes sense that they would. But there's no direct link that you can look at historically and therefore impute forward as to what that relationship should be. As far as I know. Any other comments on that? Harsha, what do you think?
Well, from India point of view, it is more of a taste, and they mix it with the pigeon pea, so it looks like a pigeon peas to them for the tender. As far as price is concerned, if I talk from the Indian point of view, green lentils, if given with a price difference to the red lentils, let's say like $25 or $50, I think we would see more consumption of green lentils going into India. Before it was more for South India, for tenders and their consumption, but slowly, gradually, what I have learned in last few years, it's getting more popular in North India. It's getting more into the hoteling and various farms, which are acceptable to the north part of India. So I think with that price difference, India will accept more of green lentils in maybe coming years. This is what I feel.
Okay, Sudhakar? Good, okay. Tim, how is the crop coming in Montana and North Dakota? You're probably better informed on that than I am. Could you give us a couple of comments on that?
In the United States, we've had a huge increase in lentil production, and as Gerald told you earlier, about 75% of our production is green lentils. We do have some red lentils, but mostly green, mostly richly lentil type. So just as a comparison, so last year we planted about 493,000 acres of lentils in the United States. And first, in the Pacific Northwest, we got absolutely no rain until September 15th. And basically the crop was about half the size of what we normally see. So it's a long ways from the bin, but certainly we have increased acreage and a potential for 400 to 450,000 acres if everything goes perfectly, or 450,000 metric tons of product, most of that green. And so it should be fun. And what's fun about the United States is the potential for even more acreage in the future, because Montana is just getting started. Right? So in Saskatchewan, early, right, we went into all those summer fallow areas. Well, in Montana, there's over 2 million acres of summer fallow that are a potential to plant pulse crops that don't have any crop on them at all right now. And so we believe in the next 5 years we'll see quite a bit of increase in that area for pulse production.
Thanks, Tim. That means that we have a big job to do to sell an ever bigger crop. But the trends are clear from the past 30 years. And I look at production 30 years ago, what we're doing now. We're sold out. We had a big crop last year, and we will have a significant tonnage this year to work between the United States and the Canadians. But we seem to find a home for it, so that's the good news. Any other questions? Yes, Dan. Be gentle.
Hi, Dan from the office next to Journal. Quick question for the panel. We're spending a lot of money to increase demand for pulses, and I'm just wondering how much demand we're destroying with currency fluctuations, oil prices. I mean, we've seen problems in Algeria, Venezuela, Egypt seems to have problems on the go, Indian regulations on imports. I'm just wondering from the panel how they see demand growth over the coming years.
I think currency is one of the major factors to decide upon the price for any importer or for any exporter. I totally agree when the currency is quite fluctuating, and if the imports become quite expensive for the Indian importers, they rather look for the substitutes. And this has one of the major impact on the buying for Indian buyers at least.
I think you're right, Dan, that the currency does play a very important role, especially in populations which are not very well off. So when the prices go up, or when the currency adversely affects the local prices of commodities, you see a drop. But these are staple products for example, for the Middle East market. So demand does not go down so much, but yes, it does affect. Currency fluctuations do affect the demand patterns a lot.
And Pedro, in context of that question, Spain's had some challenges economically lately. I know in years past, Spain imported many more tons of green lentils than they do now. I understand you switched to more pardinas, but demand seems to be stable. Is there any prospect for growing your business in Spain from greater lentil consumption?
I don't think so, because as I commented previously, the Spanish market is quite mature. The dry pulses market is stable or moving 1 or 2% up or down any year. What it's growing a little bit, it's the canning market, but not for lentils, because lentils, I mean, the canning market, it's shared, let's say 45% chickpeas, 45% white beans, and just 10% on lentils. So mainly lentils are consumed in dry, in packets.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks. Next question. Now's your chance. We can't ask questions again until we get to Toronto for the CSEA.
I'd like to add to what Sudhakar just said.
Sorry,
I'd like to add to what Sudhakar said. Sudhakar mentioned about why people eat. They want the lentils to be green, even though when they cook them it becomes brown. Very funny observation, because we do a lot of commodities into these markets. Most of the people are not very literate, so for them, color and branding is everything. So for example, if they get attracted to a certain packaging, they don't know what's on the packaging, they remember the color of the packaging, they'll say, this is the best one, buy only this. So I encourage all of you exporting to Iran to improve your packaging and, make some brighter colors and nicer names, use an eagle somewhere or a falcon, it helps generate demand. So it doesn't really depend on, packaging is a very important part of these markets as well.
Packaging is critical. We had our bag up for a while, and the green color is appreciated by the people of Iran.
So, Gerald, I'd like to ask a question of yourself and the panelists as well. We can't let the panelists get off easy here. Let's have a price prediction of what you think after the harvest the prices will be at coming in September.
Nico, what do you think?
I believe that if the crop goes well as expected and in comparison to what is planted, I think we will have a price reduction later on in the crop. That's all I have to say right now. But in any case, all markets have to buy what they need every year. So regardless of the price, we'll have to be buyers at some point. Now when they're expensive, we have to wait and see what is going to happen during the next months.
Harsha, have any projections on price levels after harvest, the next 6 months?
I think it's going to be a good production in USA and Canada as compared to last few years. And if we talk about Indian buying, Indian buyers have already made a position at the lowest of 760 and higher of 930. So they are pretty covered for their quick shipments like September, October, or November. But probably if given a good price like 750, 800, they would be buying again. Going forward, November, I don't think India will be buying a lot at this point of time because they would like to see monsoon and the seeding for pigeon peas crop in India. But 750, 800 is where I see a good volume again back for Indian market.
And you're talking about red lentils with those values, right?
No, I'm talking about green lentils.
Green lentils.
Yeah.
Wow. We have a wishful buyer here.
I'm going to pass on to Pedro.
I think Spanish sectors has no big stock of the old crop because the high prices, especially in the last months. But as I commented, we have a good acreage seeded this year. We got quite a lot of rain in the last 4 or 5 weeks. So now it's about 5 weeks to begin the crop. So I guess we're going to get a crop on green lentils, also in Pardinas. So maybe we are not in a hurry to buy for first shipments. And as she said, we will wait for lower prices to buy.
Any comments, Atik? What do you think?
I kind of agree with what they're saying. I wish prices go down as low as they say. We'll sell more. But I think, yeah, we have a good crop. But at the same time, markets are quite empty right now. So there has been some new crop demand. Some people have started buying, but we wait and watch. I mean, it's always difficult to predict prices, so we wait and watch and see what happens.
Thank you. We have 4 buyers up here, so we have wishful buyers waiting for lower prices. My comment would be that we have 0 stocks. We're totally dependent on this crop, so it depends on the next 12 weeks. I think opening prices will stay firm, and then we'll see a slow erosion once we get past November, December. But I think the opening prices will stay firm just because we need to recharge the pipeline. Any other questions? Well, I'd like to thank our Turkish hosts. I'd like to invite you all to Toronto to the CSCA convention in early July. And thanks for your time this morning, and thanks to the esteemed panel.
All right, Gerald and panel, thank you very much for a great. We have a small gift for each of you as you exit the stage here. But Nico and Harsha, Atik, and Pedro, thank you very much for serving on the panel. Really excellent. And I hope your green lentil prices are a little higher than that, you know. All right, so we are moving on to our coffee break right now. And again, I'd like to thank our session sponsor, Jawaharlal and Sons, who is sponsoring this session. We do have a coffee break that is sponsored by AKA Technology, and so please thank your sponsors as you're drinking your coffee. And we will be back in here at 11:15 to have the ingredients, new foods, and new markets powered by Pulses. Great panel coming up, so please be back in here at 11:15.